All right, so today we're going to be working on double trait crosses, which is a little bit different than what we've been talking about, because now we're going to be doing two single trait crosses at the same time. So obviously that's going to be a little bit more complicated. Oop, that looks ugly, so I'll just change that. So double trait crosses, again, are you're dealing with two traits at the same time. And there's a few different steps here to do a double trait cross. And it's going to be a little bit different than single trait crosses. And step number one is to write out the parents' phenotypes and genotypes. So we're going to need an example, okay? And let's go ahead and use hair color and hairstyle. So let's go capital B is going to stand for brown hair, and that's going to be dominant to lowercase b, which is going to stand for red hair. And for style, let's use capital C, which is going to stand for curly, is going to be dominant to little c, which is going to stand for straight. Now notice that when you use the letter C, big C's and little c's have exactly the same shape. Okay, they're very similar. So you need to make sure that when you're using letters like C and like S, that you write them, the little c and the little s have to be really little in comparison to the other c. Otherwise, you will make a goofy mistake. Okay, so let's say our two parents, let's say parent 1. So parent 1 is heterozygous for hair color and homozygous recessive for hairstyle. Okay? All right. Parent 2 is going to be heterozygous for both traits. All right, so step number 1, we have to write out the parents' phenotypes and genotypes. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and add a slide here. We'll do it on a new slide. Okay, so here we're going to write out the parents' genotypes and phenotypes. Okay, so let's do parent 1. And the genotype for parent 1 and phenotype for parent 1. So the genotype was heterozygous for hair color, big B, little b. And it was homozygous recessive for hairstyle, okay, which is going to be little c, little c. That's the genotype. Okay, parent 2 was heterozygous for both. So that's going to be big B, big C, little c. Just remember to make your little c little, okay, like I said in the previous slide. So you got to make sure that you see that they're little. And you can even see, if I look up top here at parent number 1, those are kind of big. I need to kind of be careful and just be aware of that. All right, the phenotype. For the parent 1, they're going to have brown hair, and their hair is going to be straight. For parent number 2, the phenotype, brown hair, and the hairstyle is going to be curly. Capital C dominating over little c. Okay? All right, and that's step 1. Once you have that done, now it's time to do step 2. Step 2 is you're going to determine parents' sex cells. And remember, sex cells are called gametes. So a gamete is a sex cell. Okay? The way that you do this is we use the FOIL method. And it's the same FOIL method that you use in math, if you can remember that. What you do is you write out the parent. So let's do parent 1. Okay? Write out their genotype. Big B, little c, little c. Okay. Remember, the F in FOIL stands for first. So I'm going to take the first letters of each trait. So that would be big B with little c. Okay, so I'm going to write that over here. Big B, little c. All right, that's F. O in FOIL stands for outside. Okay, so that's going to be the outer letters of my genotype. So that's going to be big B with little c. And that's the second gamete. Now the I, those are the inner letters. Little b, little c. And then L stands for last. And again, that's going to be little b, the last of each of the traits. So little b, little c. And that's how you do FOIL. Okay? We got to do that again for parent 2. So parent 2 has a little bit different genotype. Big B, big C, little c. Okay, again, I'm going to do first. So that's big B, big C. Outer would be big B with that little c. Inner is going to be little b with big C. Now, this is where we kind of break the rules. Because I chose to do hair color first, so that was the trait I chose as my trait number 1. I mean, notice up here, I chose hair colors first. Okay, hair colors first. I made that decision all the way back in the beginning. I'm going to keep in my gametes, I'm going to keep the hair color first as well. So it's going to be little b, big C. Okay? And then finally the L would be little b, little c. And that's how you determine the parent's gametes. Now, these gametes are going to be placed, just like in a single trait cross, the gametes, the parents are on the outside of the box. So these gametes are what we're going to place into our double trait Punnett square. Okay? So let's go ahead and move on to the next part on a new slide. Step number 3 is to actually do the cross. So do the cross. And what we're going to do is we're going to, I'm just going to write these up here for reference. So big B, little c. Little c was the parent 1, crossed with big B, little b, sorry, big C, little c. Okay. Now, a double trait cross, your Punnett square is going to be a 4x4 box. Okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to put the gametes from step 2 in each space. All right, so remember, we'll do parent 1 up top. So that would be, the first gamete was big B, little c. The second gamete was big B, little c. The third gamete was little b, little c. The fourth gamete was little b, little c. All right, then we'll put parent 2 on the side. The first gamete was big B, big C. Second one was big B, little c. Third one was little b, big C. Fourth one was little b, little c. Now, remember that usually we put the capital letter first, but that's when you're talking about the same trait. Because I chose hair color first, in this case down here where I put the little b in front of the big C, that's the reason I did that, because the hair color comes first, then the style. Okay, now we have to do some crossing. When you do some crossing, when you actually do the crosses, the same letters come back together. So for this first one, the big B is going to go with the big B. So I'm going to write those two first because that was what I chose first. And then the big C is going to go together with the little c. And you can see why you got to make those little c's little c's. You got to make sure they're little c's because you'll be doing this. It's complicated. You will make a mistake. So when I write this one, I'm even going to be more absurd. I'm going to make that really little. Okay. All right. Now for the next one. The next one, the big B is going to go with the big B. And the big C is going to go with the little c. Next one's going to be big B, little b. Big C, little c. Next one's going to be big B, little b. Big C, little c. Okay, there's the first row. Now the next one. So again, you're going to put the B's back together, you're going to put the C's back together. So big B, little c, little c. Okay. Next one. Big B, little c, little c. The next one, big B, little c, little c. The last one, big B, little c, little c. Okay. Next row, little b is going to go with big B. So now we go back to our original rules. I'm going to put the big B first, then the little b, and then big C, little c. Next one would be big B, big C, little c. Next one is little b, big C, little c. Next one is little b, big C, little c. All right, the last row, big B, little c, little c. Big B, little b, sorry. Little c, little c. Little b, little c, little c. Little b, little c, little c. Okay. So now we have our 16-box Punnett square filled. And remember, the inside of the box, this is the probability of the different offspring that these two parents can have. It doesn't mean they're going to have 16 kids. Okay? It means that every time they have a child, these are the possible genotypes of that child using both traits. Now, step 4, I'm going to keep this box right here. So step 4, I'm going to do a little bit of a cleaning up. Okay, I'm going to erase this up here and just do step 4 right up here. Because we just need to be able to see the box. It'd be a lot easier. So step 4 is you have to do the phenotypic ratio. Now, with the phenotypic ratio, we don't do a genotypic ratio for double trait crosses. And this is because it would be very, very complicated. With a double trait cross, there's a lot more possible phenotypes than with a single trait cross. So all we do for double trait crosses is a phenotypic ratio. And phenotypic ratios are going to be 4 numbers long. Okay? And remember, phenotype is what we see. It's what we see on the outside. So I'm not caring about letter combinations, really. I'm just counting what we would see. Okay? And here are the rules for phenotypic ratio for a double trait cross. The first number in the ratio is dominant for the first trait, dominant for the second trait. Okay? The second number is dominant for the first trait, recessive for the second trait. The third number is recessive for the first trait, dominant for the second trait. And the fourth number is recessive for the first trait and recessive for the second trait. Always in that order. So always remind yourself, like, what am I looking for? So if I'm looking for a dominant, with this example, I'm looking for brown hair, curly hair. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark how many dominants I have, okay? So this first box, this one right here, has brown hair, curly hair. That's a dominant. So I'm just going to put an X through that one. Okay, there's one. The second box would be brown hair, curly hair. There's 2. Next one, brown hair, curly hair. 3. Next one, brown hair, curly hair. 4. So currently I have 4 dominants. All right, let's check the next row. This first box is brown hair, but it's straight. Okay, so that's not dominant. So I'm just going to skip that one. Next one's brown straight. Next one's brown straight. So I'm over here now. Next one's brown straight. Okay, so none of those were dominant. I'm going to leave all those blank. All right, the next row. Okay, there's one. Brown, curly. Brown, curly. Okay. Oh, this next one right here, this is red, curly. So that's not dominant. This is red, curly. Okay, looking at the last row, I've got brown, straight, and then red, straight, and red, straight. Okay, so I'm done. So now I'm just going to count up my X's. I've got 6 X's, so my first number is a 6. Okay, good. Now it's always good to change to a different color. Okay, so now I'm going to use a different color here, and we're going to count. Now we're looking for dominant recessive. That's going to look like brown hair, straight hair. Okay? So I'm going to skip the first row because those were all checked off already. So I'm starting here, and this is definitely brown hair, straight hair. So I'm going to just make an X there. There's 1. Okay, here's brown hair, straight hair. Brown hair, straight hair. Brown hair, straight hair. Okay, I'm up to 4. All right, looking at the second row, I'm going to skip the first 2 because those are done. This next one right here, that's not brown hair, straight hair. That's red hair, curly hair. Okay, next one is red hair, curly hair. Okay, so next row and final row here, we're starting here. This is brown and straight. So that's what I'm looking for. And brown and straight. And then red and straight and red and straight. Okay, so I'm done. All right, so I've got 6. Okay, so 6 for the second number. All right. The next one I'm looking for, I'm going to change my color again. The next one I'm looking for is going to be recessive for the first trait, dominant for the second trait. Okay, so that's going to be red hair and curly. Okay, now it's going to get a lot easier because I've all these boxes that are checked off and I'll check again. So this first one I'm going to start with is right here. Okay, and that's going to be red hair and curly. So that's 1 and 2. Okay, looking at the last row. Those 2 down there, those aren't red and curly. Those are red and straight. Okay, so I've only got 2. All right, the last one is really just to check yourself. It should be the rest of the boxes. If you did everything right, the last, whatever you have left is the last one. It's recessive. Okay, so that's going to be red hair and straight. And that one's red hair and straight, and that one's red hair and straight. So that's a 2. Okay, now you always have to ask yourself, can I reduce? Can I divide these numbers by the same number and get a whole number out? And I can. I can divide everything by 2. If I divide everything by 2, it's a 3 to 3 to 1 to 1 ratio. And there you go. That's a double trait cross. Okay, the last thing we're going to take care of, the last little bit of notes is when we talked about a monohybrid cross yesterday. So yesterday we talked about a monohybrid cross. We also have, wouldn't you believe it, we also have a dihybrid cross. A dihybrid cross is a double trait cross where both parents are heterozygous for both traits. Okay? All right, so for our example, that would be parent 1 would have been big B, big C, little c, crossed with parent 2, which would have been big B, big C, little c. Heterozygous for both traits. All right, just to save time, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint. The phenotypic ratio for every double trait cross, for every dihybrid cross, is always a 9 to 3 to 3 to 1 ratio. So in other words, if I did this cross, so just like I did the previous one, I would get 9 of those children, 9 of the possibilities would be red hair and curly. I would get 3 kids that would be red hair straight. Oh, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I would get 9 that would be brown hair curly. I would get 3 that would be brown hair straight. I would get 3 that would be red hair and curly. And I would get 1 that would be red hair and straight. Okay, remember it's always dominant, 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 recessive, recessive, dominant, recessive, recessive. Okay? All right.